Hello, folks. Welcome, welcome. And welcome to the folks on Zoom today. And Ian's given me a whole long, nice list of announcements. So my name is Jan Fike, and I'm a member of the Fine Arts Committee here. Our team is happy to welcome you to this session. This is our third session with Al, so we're really fortunate. First of all, take out your cell phones or make sure that your cell phones are silenced. And as I said, welcome to the Haas people. And today we have Amy over there doing the technician work. So we're happy to have here Dave, who has done it before, was not able to come today. If you have any questions for Al, he will take them as the presentation is going. So just raise your hand and I will run around with a microphone again. For our online participants, you may share your questions in the Zoom chat. As a reminder, next Tuesday, April 2, is the first of our 2 monthly programs in April. Next week's program is titled Defining Good County Governance, and is presented by Eric Lufer, President of Citizens Research Council of Michigan, and Allegan County Commissioner Jim Story. That's my county. You can join us in person at Jack Miller Center for Musical Arts, where coffee, cookies, and donuts will be served beginning at 9 a.m. and join virtually on YouTube. Stay tuned for the next happenings for the link. Again, the program begins at 9:30 on Tuesday, April 2. And now I've forgotten to take all my notes up about Al's biography, but I think we know him by now, and we're happy to have him back for our third session. So give him a welcome.
Thank you, Jan. It is a pleasure to be back. I realize Jan has been talking about these 20 books that I've written, and you may not believe that, so I thought I'd put a list on the back. One of them, I must confess, one of them is a co-author, and so maybe I should say 19 and a half, but we'll round it up, I guess. As far as I know, all those books are available on all the online sources and things if you want to get them. Okay, today we're talking about how radio transitions in the late 40s, early 50s. Some of the radio shows made the transition to television. Some of them hung around on radio. Some of them lasted up until 55, 56. So it's a sort of it is a transitional era as we get into the late 40s and early 50s. I pointed out when I started a couple of weeks ago that radio just essentially took vaudeville and put it on the air. By the time we get to 1945, radio entertainment has had to change and adapt, but radio has become such a huge thing in American life. We probably don't, well, I guess most of us did grow up with a radio, but radio was what television now is, and that's kind of hard, particularly for the younger generation, to think about. It is a true statistic. By 1945, more American homes had a radio than had a bathtub. At the same time, people were experimenting. It's always, we make a step forward and then we have to see if we can make another step. That's what happened when we started with the telegraph and the telephone. And then somebody says, well, hey, could we do this without the wires? And, there you go. So now by the 1930s, people are saying, okay, we can hear things. Wouldn't it be great if we could see things? And so people were actually experimenting in the 1930s. David Sarnoff, we've mentioned before, headed up RCA, NBC, or RCA, I should say. David Sarnoff was one of the big leaders in this whole business of getting a visual aspect to this. As he said in one letter, I believe that television, which is the technical name for seeing instead of hearing by radio, will come to pass in due course. So by 1932, CBS was actually broadcasting a few hours of television every week. Of course, there's, like half a dozen TV sets in the whole country. But still, it's out there. The idea is there. The British were ahead of us on this. I read somewhere that a visitor to Edward R. Murrow's apartment in London in 1937 was amazed to see a movie being shown on a small TV screen. At the 1939 World's Fair, Sarnoff and RCA put on quite a display. Let's get down here. There's Franklin Roosevelt on television at the 1939 World's Fair. He was the first president to appear on television. And, this was all still very experimental since there were so few sets, but still it's there. And people know that it's going to develop, it's going to come along. The first commercial television license in America was granted by the FCC in 1941. Of course, there are only half a dozen stations in the entire country. And only a few hundred people could see what was being put out. World War II really put an end to commercial television experimentation. There was just other stuff that we needed to work on. But once the war was over, people really got into this whole idea of radio that you could see. I think I put on the handout, in 1946, there were fewer than 20,000 TV sets in the entire country. By the end of 1949, factories were producing 250,000 sets a month. So that's how quickly, within 3 years, 4 years, this thing grew up. If I can paraphrase the old song, how you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? Well, how are you going to keep them on radio after they've seen TV? And to us, it would look like TV from the Stone Ages. I mean, this picture that you have here, nobody would sit and watch that today. It's so very primitive. But it's just an absolutely astounding thing if you've never seen it before. Radio, of course, wants to compete, and the people who are on radio don't want to give up what they're doing. Some of the shows have been hanging around for a long, long time. I put on your handout that Edgar Bergen's show goes back into the mid 1930s, and I started to say he and Charlie McCarthy didn't quit. No, of course not.
Are you eating a tomato or is that your nose?
Very good, Charles. You must come down with.
This show, of course, was just enormously popular. I'm reminding myself there's a famous incident where what's his name? The other famous ventriloquist that I can't think of. Pardon? I shouldn't have brought it up because I can't think of it right now. Anyway, famous ventriloquist was on rehearsing for TV, and the sound people said, we can't pick up the dummy, what he's saying. and the sound guy says, I've got the microphone right in front of his mouth. But anyway, one of the things that made McCarthy and Bergen so popular was the long-running feud.
Me after the show to the lumberyard. The right piggyback off the buzz saws.
Nobody's gonna find me after the show.
Yes, they are. You'll be hanging in my window as a Venetian blind.
That makes me shudder.
Quiet, or I'll throw a woodpecker on you.
You know, I've always been very fond of our feathered friend. Yes. Large or small, came a while.
Blonde or brunette, yeah. Bill, you have quite a collection, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I always have a very rare Australian duck-billed platypus.
How small is this bird? Do you have to have glasses to see it?
Yes, about 3 or 4.
Bergen got himself in trouble at one point when he had Mae West as a guest. And
Ladies and gentlemen, at last the long-awaited meeting of Siren Mae West and Casanova Charles McCarthy has arrived. This is the romantic battle of the century, the dramatic moment that millions have been looking forward to. Tension is running high, and so are the bets. The odds are Mae West 5, Charlie McCarthy 3. There's some talk that Charlie will weaken. They say no man can resist her. But there are others who feel that Charlie will vanquish the vampire. Wait a minute, last-minute flash. There's been a drop in the odds. Mae West 4, Charlie McCarthy 4.5. Let's get a word from the challenger, Charlie McCarthy. What have you got to say, Charlie?
It looks like a tough fight, Mom, but I think I'll win.
Why do you say it's a tough fight?
Well, my opponent's in great form. He's got lots of training.
What do you think of your chances of winning?
Well, I've had some great fights in the East.
What do you think of West?
Mighty pretty country, mighty pretty.
Well, Charlie's never been in better condition. He's a fashion plate with his midnight blue full-dress suit, top hat and monocle, and a blue-white butterfly tie and dress shirt.
Yeah, it's PK.
PK tie and shirt.
Yeah, shot with gravy.
And now a word from the champion, Mae West. We've heard so much about you, Miss West. Won't you say a word?
Well, all I've got to say is where there's smoke, there's fire. Wow. Boy, she burns me up. There's nothing I'd like better than the aroma of burning wood. I wonder if she means me.
You better watch out, Charlie.
Say, Charlie, do you smell that perfume? Yeah. Isn't it ravishing? Yes, it is. It's ravishing. It's weakening. So help me. I'm swooning. What is it? Why, it's my favorite perfume, Ashes of Men. Uh-oh. Ashes of Men? Holy smoke. She's not going to make a cinder out of me.
I'm sorry, that's a lot harder to understand than I realized it would be. She does go on in that routine to talk about him leaving his keys the last time he was in her apartment. And so it all gets kind of racy. If you want to talk about radio from the 30s up into the 40s, of course, it's the soap operas. They had the radio bosses had things figured out, so women's programming would be done during the day while the women, of course, were at home working. Then you shift into stuff more for kids when they're coming home from school. And then you get into things in the evenings. You get into things like Bergen and some of the other fuller shows that we have talked about. When it comes to soap operas, these folks, Frank and Ann Hummert, they're actually called the Hummert Radio Factory. They produced during the 30s and 40s about 50% of the soap operas and other. I mean, they wrote mysteries and dramas, but if there were radio programs, a good chance, 50-50 chance that it comes from Frank and Ann Hummert. They're an interesting couple. He was 15 years older than she was. He had made and lost a fortune in real estate before the First World War. And then to, put food on the table, he got a job writing advertising jingles and limericks, things like that. He wrote some advertising for selling war bonds during the First World War. People say that one of his efforts, bonds or bondage, was something that proved very effective in selling a lot of the war bonds. Anne, like I say, was 15 years younger. She had quite a life herself. By the time she was 25, she had finished college, worked in Europe, gotten married, had a couple of kids, and gotten divorced. I mean, that's a pretty full life for somebody by the age of 25. She was hired as a secretary in Hummert's office. And before long, the two of them were married and were working together. Anne actually wrote most of the plot development for the shows. They had a house in Connecticut, and she lived up there, wrote the treatments for the different shows, and would send the material down to their office in New York City. There are so many of their shows. We've mentioned Helen Trent. There's so many of them that whichever ones I might choose to talk about, you end up asking, well, why didn't you talk about this or that? Well, because it's just not enough time. That's the whole problem that I found myself facing today. And if I don't mention your favorite show or something, it's just because there's too many of them. Some of the Hummert shows ran for years and years. And of course, when you're on radio, you can replace the actors. Nobody knows. You can't see the people. And I say actors, they're not so much actors as they are script readers. And they never have to memorize the lines. They never have to figure out how to move when they're acting and so on. Some of these folks didn't transition to television very well at all, because they were just used to standing in front of a microphone reading a script. Same problem that some actors had when they went from the silent movies to the talkies. They just did not have what it took to actually speak into a microphone. Probably the most popular soap opera in the 1940s was Our Gal Sunday. It ran from, I couldn't believe this, ran from 1934 to 1959. 25 years. But in spite of that, there are only 3 recorded episodes in existence today. They just simply did not record the thing. The storyline of the show is absurd, quite frankly. There are these 2 miners, silver miners in Colorado, who wake up one morning and find a baby girl abandoned on the doorstep of their cabin. Since it's Sunday morning, they name her Sunday, and they raise her as their daughter. The mine is owned by a rich Englishman, Lord Henry. He shows up one day to see what's going on. Ends up meeting Sunday, and of course falls in love, and yada, yada, yada. They end up married, and they end up on his estate in Virginia. The marriage of these 2 people was, how many of you saw Luke and Laura get married on General Hospital? I mean, this Sunday's marriage was the event of the year. They adopted a child. They had 2 biological children. One of the children, little Davy, was crippled by a hit-and-run driver. Over the 25 years, women were always after Lord Henry, and men were always after Our Gal Sunday. But of course, none of that ever turned into anything. I think I was kind of disappointed in the quality of one of the clips that I was able to find.
Once again, we present Our Gal Sunday, the story of an orphan girl named Sunday who was left on the steps of the cabin of two old miners who raised her from childhood in the little mining town of Silver Creek, Colorado, who, in young womanhood, married England's richest, most handsome lord, Lord Henry Winthrop. The story that asks the question, can this girl from a little mining town in the West find happiness as the wife of a wealthy and titled Englishman? Let me tell you about a remedy that thousands of people now use to get quick relief from the pains caused by headache, neuralgia, and rheumatism. People use it because the results are truly astonishing. This remedy is called...
I did want to play that because all of these shows start with three things. They have an organ, they have a narrator because you need to keep up with what's going on, and the first thing you hear is a commercial. And it's usually a kind of long, loud, obnoxious commercial. Anyway, like I say, there are only 3 clips that we have, and the quality of them I found unsatisfactory to spend a lot of time on. As I say, there were several hundred of these soap operas. The ones created by the Hummert Radio Factory are some of the most interesting and varied. I don't know what was going on in Ann Hummert's mind. I mean, she's writing at least script summaries for all of these things. I don't want to brag, but I have written a few books, and sometimes I sit down and I think, okay, where am I going with this? What's going to happen here? And if I had to come up with, a couple of dozen of these things a day, man, I don't know how you would ever do it. I really don't know how you would do it. And it's hard to remember sometimes, even when you've written the stuff. I was talking with the editor that I work with, and she was asking me about a plot point in one of the books. And I told her, I said, Judy, I'm going to have to go back and reread it because I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And so in the couple of books that I'm working on now, I get to a point and I think, okay, haven't I used the tunnel thing before? Or, what? You don't want to get caught repeating yourself. But the Hummerts not only did soap operas, they had dramatic, even kind of mystery stuff. One of the shows that they did was called Front Page Feral. It started out as a newspaper reporter and his wife, and then as it developed, it got more and more into kind of a mystery deal. There would be a case presented on Monday, and by Friday, the case would be solved. So you didn't have to go over the weekend. The original actor in Front Page Feral, the male actor, was Richard Widmark. I know some of you know that name. But this is the woman, Virginia Dwyer, who played the wife of David Farrell. I couldn't find a clip that really satisfied me because, like I say, you've got the case presented on Monday and blah, 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 and then the case solved on Friday. And I guess unless we could go through one of the whole cases 15 minutes at a time, it wouldn't make much sense. One of the shows, the Hummert shows, that I would say departed from the traditional format was one called Just Plain Bill. Bill Davidson was a barber in a small town. He gave advice, and the show, Ann Hummert must have been kind of interested in mysteries because Just Plain Bill kind of veered towards solving mysteries just like David Farrell did. Bill had a daughter, Nancy, her husband. They often worked together solving mysteries. And it was another one of those cases when Bill's daughter was going to have a baby. People sent hundreds of baby gifts to their local radio stations, cards and things. These shows really got into people's lives. I mean, they loved them.
Lady, those flies buzzing around your kitchen aren't as innocent as they look. They carry germs, spread disease. Get rid of them fast. Use Black Flag insect spray. Black Flag contains active ingredients which spell sudden death for insects. Keeps right on knocking them dead for weeks when used as directed. Harmless to fabrics, furniture, and wallpaper, designed for quick knockdown and lasting effect at amazingly low prices. Get Black Flag insect spray today. Now, Just Plain Bill. Here is the music that brings you one of radio's best-loved stories. Just Plain Bill Davidson, barber of Hartsville. A tender, real-life story of people who might be your own next-door neighbors. Today, many thousands of people are thankful to their physicians or dentists for first having introduced them to Anacin. For these people know that Anacin brings incredibly fast and effective relief.
How did Evelyn's husband, Leslie Groves, take the reading of the will, Terry?
With a superior smile on that smug face of his. Well, of course, it was pretty well known Leslie would inherit the bulk of his wife's estate.
And it was the second time Evelyn's mother lost her chance at the Seymour fortune. How did Judith Seymour take it?
Like an iceberg during the actual reading.
Sometimes I think her protege, Rudy Blanton, loved Evelyn more than her own husband or her mother.
None of this tragedy might have happened if a year ago Evelyn had married Rudy instead of Leslie.
But Leslie was after Evelyn's money even then.
Well, do you believe he killed his wife for money, Nancy?
Well,
If you do, Nancy, you're in good company. Rudy is convinced now that Leslie is the murderer. So is Judith's chauffeur, Bill.
Baker was there for the reading.
Yes. Miss Evelyn, as he calls her, remembered him in her will, Nancy.
Oh, I wish you'd tell me about it, Daddy.
What Bill ran into upstairs beforehand is a lot more to the point.
Well, Daddy, what happened?
Well, Judith found a bottle marked poison in Leslie's bureau drawer.
That was used to poison the fruit Judith Seymour brought to you, Daddy. Am I right?
Probably. We turned the bottle over to the sheriff.
Whoever made that attempt on your life, Daddy, was afraid you'd seen Evelyn's murder.
And no question about that.
Well, then Leslie Groves is the man you're after.
Or Rudy.
Well, Terry, I don't understand.
Leslie is the logical.
Make sure I get rid of, okay, there. As I listened to a couple of the Just Plain Bill episodes, I found it interesting that it seemed like they were always identifying the characters, you know. And there's a rule in writing that when people are talking, they don't tell one another things that they both know. And so Bill would sometimes say, so-and-so, who is John's husband or wife or something like that. And I thought, I wonder if this is to help the audience figure out all these characters or what's going on. But they did it more in that one, I think, than in any other soap opera that I've been getting acquainted with. Another of the Hummert shows, and one of the longest running ones.
To save both time and money in waxing floors, use economical no-rubbing Aero Wax. Just apply it, and in 6 to 9 minutes, it dries itself to a hard, lustrous finish that saves countless scrubbings. Makes dingy floors shine like new. Yet Aero Wax costs only 25 cents a pint. Try Aero Wax, AEROWAX, tomorrow.
Mr. Keene, Tracer of Lost Persons, is on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, the makers of Colonos toothpaste present Mr. Keene, Tracer of Lost Persons, one of the most famous characters of American fiction in one of radio's most thrilling dramas. Tonight and every Thursday night from 7:30 to 8 Eastern Wartime, the famous old investigator will take from his files and bring to us one of his most celebrated missing persons cases.
Eastern wartime is just daylight saving time. That's what they called it then. This show, The Tracer of Lost Persons, became kind of popular, as far as other people referring to it. There is an episode of The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason, Ralph Cramden, and at one point, Ralph cannot find his razor blades, and so he asks Alice, where are the razor blades? And she says, "Who am I, Mrs. Keene, tracer of lost razor blades?" Of course, I just barely becoming aware. Any of you seen the relatively new program now called Tracker? This guy's looking for lost people and so on. My wife's kind of gotten into it. I'm sort of meh as far as I'm concerned. Of course, women play an enormous role in these soap operas as characters, as performers, as writers. We've seen Helen Trent, Our Gal Sunday. Most of them are about women. One of the ones that I thought was kind of interesting was Joyce Jordan, MD.
Breath, America.
Stop it for just a minute here. This is another show that stayed on for quite a long time. I should mention with the Mr. Keene thing, there were over 700 episodes that were aired, but it's another one of those cases where you only got like 4 or 5 episodes that were ever recorded, which is it's unfortunate. But with this show, this one ran for 10 years, 1938 to 1948. Joyce Jordan starts out as an intern and gradually works her way up, becomes a doctor. And she has a motto which goes, "The sick in body, I try to heal. The sick in soul, I try to comfort. For to everyone, rich or poor, young or old, a doctor's hand is a helping." Now, of course, this goes through the war, and women played increasing roles in various professions during the war. And then after the war, there's an effort made to sort of push women back into more traditional roles. But Joyce Jordan continues to hold on to be, to be a doctor. She gets all the way up to being an MD. She, of course, is a very attractive young woman, as you can see here, always having to fight off the attention of co-workers and patients and all this sort of stuff. What was interesting to me is that the program really did not shy away from what would be considered some kind of controversial issues. There's an episode about a woman who gives birth out of marriage, out of wedlock, which for the 40s, was pretty astounding. And dealing with veterans returning from the war. There's one situation where a veteran has what we would call PTSD these days. So it dealt with some rather controversial sort of issues.
His favorite brand for dishes presents Joyce Jordan, MD.
Buy it. There's just nothing like it.
Try it. You'll see. It's simply grand.
Use it. It does the job. Bing, bang, bing.
It sure does, that new improved draft. If you hate to do dishes, you'll love that new draft. It does dishes far faster, far easier, far better than any soap you ever heard of. Why, in the hardest water, the new draft gives you more suds, ounce for ounce, than any product known. And how those suds do dishes. Wash 'em cleaner than soap ever could. They shine even without wiping. Why, those new Dreft suds work so hard they cut grease without scouring. Have such an amazing effect on grease, the dishwater never feels greasy, never even looks greasy.
Mrs. Blakely, you may be the patroness of this hospital, but Dr. Tracy is chief of staff. She has asked me to perform this operation. It happens to be the type I specialize in. I will do this operation, and I'll do the finest job that's humanly possible. But after that, Dr. Tracy, I'll follow Alexander Gray's lead. I'll resign from the staff of Hotchkiss Memorial Hospital.
Gasp. She's going to resign. This soap opera was different from the others we've been talking about because it was not written by the Hummerts. It was written by this woman, Irna Phillips, I-R-N-A, Irna Phillips. She, next to the Hummerts, was the most prolific producer of soaps. And just about all of hers feature women in prominent roles like doctors and so on. Phillips herself had a rather long career writing this kind of thing. She eventually, Joyce Jordan did not make the transition to television, but Phillips herself did. She was behind the creation of programs like The Guiding Light, The Brighter Day, and As the World Turns. So, you know, her influence goes quite a long time. We're told that she wrote for 8 hours a day, and by the late 40s was earning $250,000 a year. I was curious, and I checked on one of these charts. That would be over $4 million a year today, an enormous amount of money. I've also read that she dictated everything. You know, she did not sit down and write it, although she's shown sitting here with a notepad, but she was a dictator. She's an interesting person. She was one of 10 children whose father died when she was 8. That would be in 1909. When she was 19, so this is, let's see, right around First World War, she gave birth to a child who was stillborn, and she was not married. So, you know, these kind of traumas seem to have affected much of her writing. Her scripts were notable for, her critics say, her scripts were notable for cliffhangers and for having only women as regular characters. The men tend to come and go in her soap operas, which I guess kind of typical of her life, you might say. I was interested, I found an interview about her, people who'd worked with her.
Irna lived in Chicago. I think she had a line, now I'm not sure, but I think she had a direct line to her house for the dress rehearsal, and she would give notes. That's what I think. I thought Irna was amazing. She wrote this whole entire show and made it the #1 show on television. We're the ones that really helped CBS stay on the air. That's what I like to say. We believe that. Anyway, she would write the whole thing with her secretary, Rose, and she would, as I understand it, would act out all the parts. So sometimes we had the same mouthpiece, which bothered me. So I would change my own things. For example, when they would say, "Lisa, how are you doing?" I'd say, "Never better." Now, I think that's a cute little thing, but not everybody in town should say "never better." That was my thing, because I was very possessive of certain things like that she had written for me. I think it's amazing that she acted out all the parts because she really wanted to be an actress. And what a wonderful imagination she had and gave us this.
Did she ever come to New York?
Yes, we had big fights, of course. We had terrible fights. She used to call me up and say, "Lisa, this is Irna." And I said, Erna, this is Eileen. She says, no, you're not. You are Lisa to me. And that used to burn me up. I said, not now. I'm not. We all had this problem. I know Rosemary particularly had this problem because Rosemary would take her time off and do shows around the country. And Erna would get so mad at her because when Jeff died, poor Jeff, she was on a television station up in Chicago, and she was laughing. She had her dog on the show, and his name was Murray, and she was laughing and everything, and Erna called her up at the station. How dare you laugh? You're supposed to be mourning Jeff's death. And she said, well, I'm actually playing a hooker right now. What do you want me to do? Do extra work out on the street corner? It was just, she was funny like that.
So she really kept you in character in her mind.
In her mind, yes. We were her family. Mm-hmm. That's what it came to be. We were hers.
Another popular show that was not written by the Hummerts was Big Sister, created by a woman named Lillian Lafferty. And it ran on CBS from 1936 to 1952, CBS radio. Lafferty was a relative of the Rothschild family. You know that name, very wealthy. But she was disinherited, I think mostly because she married a Catholic. She began her career writing a Dear Abby kind of column for a newspaper. So when she got into writing soap operas, I think it probably was not too much of a stretch for her to do that. Big Sister was sponsored by another detergent, Rinso. It's amazing to me how many of these detergents there were, let alone the radio shows. Big Sister was about a woman named Ruth who took care of her younger sister and her crippled brother Ned. Even after her sister married, she still took care of Ned. Eventually, she married Ned's doctor, whose name was John Wayne. This, of course, was before the John Wayne was becoming popular. And when Ruth and John were married in 1939, again, flowers and gifts sent to radio stations. It was amazing. John was held captive in a Japanese prison camp during the Second World War. I have not been able to find a picture of her. I don't know why she's so elusive, but this is the cast of the show. This is the woman, Virginia Frost, who played Ruth, and that's the rest of the cast of the show. There was another show called Bright Horizons that grew out of Big Sister, and it did not run as long, 1941 to 46. It follows a lawyer named Michael West, who is trying to redeem his reputation in the town that he lives in, because he had defended a criminal that everybody despised. And so he's having a rough time of it. The role of Michael West was played by this man, Richard Colmar. Do you recognize his wife? Dorothy Kilgallen, yeah. We could do a whole series on her. And I did in another session, another group that I was working with, learned a lot about her interest in the Kennedy assassination. She interviewed Jack Ruby one-on-one, nobody else in the room except her and Jack Ruby. And we do not know what came out of that interview. She gave all of her notes. I'm not going to get too far into this. She gave all of her notes about the Kennedy assassination to a friend of hers. and then died under very mysterious circumstances a few days after that. So it's well worth looking into. Colmar, as I say, played in this particular show. They had 3 children. He never acknowledged his parentage of the 3rd child, but you know, those things happen. As someone, there was one review that I read of Bright Horizon. It said, the quality is none too high on Bright Horizon, but at least the 15 minutes had enough action to sustain a sort of infantile interest. So. We'll get to it in just a second. Lum and Abner, created by Chester Locke and Norris Goff. This show ran through the, well, it started in the late 30s, ran up into the 1950s. They tried to make the transition to television. It was one of these shows that didn't quite have the legs to do it, I suppose. These 2 men, Locke and Goff, had been friends, went to elementary school together, college together. When they decided to do an act like this, they thought at first of doing a blackface act, but decided instead to be hillbillies. And they come from the town of Waters, Arkansas. They renamed it Pine Ridge and became so famous and so popular that eventually the town of Waters, Arkansas, changed its name to Pine Ridge to honor Lum and Abner. They worked at the Jot 'em Down store.
Granny's, Abner, I believe that's our ring.
Hi, Doggy's Lum, I believe you're right.
Any of you remember having party lines? You know, yeah, whoop, is that my ring or is somebody next door? We're going way back here.
Now, see. Hello, Jot 'em Down store. This is Lum and Abner.
And now, let's see what's going on down in Pine Ridge. Well, at last, Lum is a free man. The courts could find no basis for a trial against him and dropped the case. So once again, the old partners are reunited and are happily running the Jot 'em Down store together. As we look in on the little community today, we find the old fellows in the store. Lum is hard at work on the financial records. Cedric has just entered. Listen.
Well, howdy, Cedric.
Howdy, Mr. Abner.
Come on in.
Yes, hello, Mr. Lum. Hello, Mr. Lum.
Ain't no use talking to Lum, Cedric. He's concentrating on the bookkeeping. Been at it all morning long. Just tickles him to death to be working on them books again.
Does, huh?
Well, it must, the amount of time he spends on them. I done all the book work while I was running the store here alone, and never take me more than 5 or 10 minutes, and just appears to take him hours to do it.
Hey, Abner, here's another entry I can't figure out.
Yeah, what is it, Lum? Old Lum's been away from them books so long, he sort of forgot how to do them.
You got Grandpappy Spears charged with 7 or something on one day, and 2 or something the next day, and 3 the next day. But it don't say what that something is.
Well, I don't know. Must be a mistake. I don't recollect selling Grandpap nothing. Wait a minute. What day was that 7's down there for?
Oh, on a Tuesday.
Tuesday. Oh, that last Tuesday. Yeah, I recollect now. Oh, them's just a record of checker games that Grandpap win from me.
Kind of hard to keep your books when you got that sort of information. There were even some new radio shows that were being introduced into the 1940s. One of those was a show called The Crime Files of Flamand. starring a fellow by the name of Myron Wallace. We would know him better, and we would recognize him, I guess, Mike Wallace. He graduated from the University of Michigan, got a job at Wood Radio, and then moved to Detroit. But his longest gig was as the title character in this show, The Crime Files of Flamon. Flamon is described by one critic as a psychologist who bypasses ballistics for brain power. So this one, even though it started in the late 40s, did not make the transition to television. Another show that did sort of span the gap between television and radio was the Chesterfield Supper Club. Guess who their sponsor was? Chesterfield, yeah. I thought one of the, well, I thought I had it up here. There is, I saw one ad for it and I thought I had it, but obviously I don't. This show featured Perry Como and Joe Stafford. You may know her. Some couple of very fine singers. Yeah, here's the one. See what she's holding? A cigarette. Yeah, I'm sure it's a Chesterfield. She needs to flick the ash. Looks like it's about to fall on her. But you know, this is the day when they're telling you that cigarettes relax you, make you feel so much better, and all that sort of stuff. This show ran from 1944 to 1950, and it marked several advances in broadcasting that I thought made it worth mentioning. It's on every night, but on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, Perry Como is the host of the show from New York City. And on Tuesday and Thursday, Joe Stafford is the hostess of the show from Los Angeles. And later, Peggy Lee took on some of that stuff. One of their most notable achievements on April 5th, 1946, they staged a live broadcast from an airplane. They loaded the band, they loaded everybody, they loaded the bleeping piano onto the plane so they could stage this broadcast. But of course, it meant that they had to make two flights. They had to make one flight for the East Coast time zone and then another flight for the West Coast time zone. But they pulled it off. They were also a pioneer in what we call simulcasting. That is, they would broadcast shows on radio and television at the same time. And this is a sort of, I guess, last ditch effort by the radio people to say, we're not going to give up, we're not going to give up. And it was not widely picked up. I mean, there were some shows that tried it, but the Supper Club here was, Chesterfield Supper Club was the first to make any kind of serious effort at simulcasting. By the 1950s, by early 1950s, a lot of the shows, popular radio shows, were making the transition to television. Now, of course, for the musical variety shows, it's easiest. Just like you went from vaudeville to radio to television, it's all pretty much the same thing. You're just singing and dancing. Soap operas, of course, don't make that transition so well. Like I said, you can't go from just standing in front of a microphone reading a script to actually acting and putting something into it. One person, though, who did make the transition very successfully from radio to television is this gentleman, Milton Berle. In fact, after a couple of years, by 52 or so, he's known as Mr. Television. He had not been a huge success in radio. I think probably because, you've seen him, it's a lot of slapstick kind of comedy. And it's such broad comedy that it doesn't go over very well on radio, but it works much better on television. I think I've got one clip here.
Oh, we're the men of Texaco. We work from Maine to Mexico. There's nothing like this Texaco of ours. Our show tonight is powerful. We'll wow you with an hour full of howls from a shower full of stars. We're the merry Texaco men. Tonight we may be showmen. Tomorrow we'll be servicing your cars.
I wipe the pipe, I pump the gas, I rub the hub, I scrub the glass.
I touch the clutch, I mop the top, I poke the choke, I sell the pop.
I clear the gear, I block the knock, I jack the back, I set the clock.
So join the ranks of those who know and fill your tanks with Texaco. Sky Chief, fill up with Sky Chief, and you will smile at the pile of new miles you will add. Fire Chief, fill up with Fire Chief, you'll find that Texaco's the finest friend your car has ever had. And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing television's #1 star, the man America discovered, Milton Berle. They stood up. Thank you, and good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Lady, please don't laugh. Columbus, 1492. What's yours? Gimbals, 1075. Lady, please, I'm going to lay the egg. She's cackling. How do you like that? How do you like that? My mother didn't show up. I don't like those telescopes. Give me these. That's the kind I like. I am alive. What the hey? How do you like me? Don't I look good, huh? You don't applaud. Don't applaud. You've heard of Ezio Pinza? I look like his brother, Safety Pinza. It's awful chilly around here. How do you like the weather? It's been so hot these past few nights, I had to get up in the middle of the night, take off my socks. You know, it's really... I really feel... How do you like the socks? Smart socks? Brooklyn socks. Brooklyn. There's not a run in either one of them. But it is really...
He does keep the jokes going really, really fast. The other major figure who emerges in television early 50s is, of course, Jack Benny. When Benny begins on television, his show really isn't a whole lot different than it was on radio. He has an announcer. You remember Don Wilson, the chunky guy he talks with. The show usually started with a little bit of repartee between the two of them. His wife, Mary Livingston, ends up interacting with him. And at first, the Jack Benny Show is basically in a studio. Eventually, though, we begin to see Benny in his home. It becomes more like a sitcom, and it takes on what television is capable of doing that radio could not do. But still, there are some things about Benny's show that I don't know, I really find them amusing. I'm going to show you one clip here where I want you to imagine yourself listening to this on radio or watching it on television. He calls it his Rocky Mountain Boys. Of course, there aren't any hillbillies in the Rocky Mountains, but I guess he didn't want to offend, the Blue Ridge Boys or the Smoky Mountain Boys or whatever it may be. But as I say, imagine how this plays either on radio or on television.
Thank you, folks. I'd like to have you meet some of the boys. You will meet a fellow over here with the concertina. That's Charlie Bagby. He's the smart one of the troupe here. Hey, Charlie, how much is 2 and 2? He's our business manager. Fella here with the clarinet is Wayne Songer. We're mighty proud of Wayne. Last week at the county fair, he won first prize at the fly attraction contest. Wasn't even entered. This is my wife.
There's the difference between television and radio. That joke would be absolutely meaningless on radio. It's funny only when you can see it. The little girl, by the way, is the daughter of his secretary, for what it's worth.
This is our boy, Sam. Get up here, Frank. This is Frankie Remley over here. Remley's been associated with Phil Harris for about 20 years. Glad to see you standing up, Frank. Never took...
Phil Harris had a reputation as an alcoholic.
Took a guitar lesson in his life, just took it up by accident. He figured as long as his hand was shaking anyway, might as well put a guitar in. He's a fella makes us laugh all the time. He's a card. Say something funny, Frankie. Rat-a-bat-tat! And now, folks...
Hey, Lem! Now, listen, Lem, I got a bone to pick with you. I don't like the way you're treating my daughter.
Paul.
You took her out last night.
Well, I brought her back.
That's what I mean.
Another show that was really very, very popular on radio, of course, was Fibber McGee and Molly. And it stayed on radio in its original form until 1956. By then, the show was running into some problems. Let's see if I've got it here.
The Johnson Wax Program with...
Hang on just a minute here. Miriam Jordan had a pretty severe alcoholism problem, and it was getting bad in the early 50s. She sometimes would not appear, and they would say that she was exhausted or something like that. But it all tied into her alcoholism. They were often approached to transition over to television, but as Jim Jordan said, they were trying to push us into TV and we were reluctant. Our friends advised us, don't do it until you need to. You have this value in radio, milk it dry. And that's pretty much what they did. This, if I can...
Fibber McGee and Molly. The makers of Johnson's Wax and Johnson's Self-Polishing Glow Coat present Fibber McGee and Molly, written by Don Quinn, with music by the King's Men and Billy Mills Orchestra. The show opens with Hallelujah.
I will point out, the two of them do all the voices on the show. So whatever you hear, it's one or the other of them. I want to get over into it a little bit here.
So much more important than winning the war that...
I'm glad you got interrupted. I think I was going to be deeply hurt.
Yeah, I think so, too. Come in. Oh, Abigail Luffington. Hello, Abigail.
Oh, how do you do, my dear? And Mr. McGee.
Hi, Effie. Have a chair. Then tear off 3 coupons and we'll gas a while.
Thank you, no, Mr. McGee. I merely wish to ask you some mechanical advice.
Well, you come to the right guy, Effie. I'm a mechanical wizard. And don't let anybody kid you. You know who really invented the diesel engine?
Good heavens, not you.
No, a guy named Diesel.
So what?
So I guess that shows I know something about engines. What's your trouble, Lefty?
Well, Mr. McGee, like most conscientious citizens, I wish to get...
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, Grand Rapids, eh?
Much support in your anti-rationing campaign, dearie. Everybody understands it but you.
Well, can I help it if I'm the only cool-headed, clear thinker in the lot? With me, it's the principle of the thing.
Well, you better put your principal in another bank. You're not getting any interest.
4 gallons of gas. If that isn't the worst injustice I ever heard of. And me that's used to driving 100 miles a week. Do you realize, Mrs. McGee, that just because of this, we're going to have bad crops this year?
Leave deeper footprints, dearie. I can't follow you.
Well, I'm telling you, there's going to be a crop shortage. And why? Too many rabbits. They eat the crops. And why too many rabbits? Because guys like me can't get enough gas to go hunting. It's preposterous.
Look, McGee, I'm tired of arguing about it. You're all wet, and I haven't got time to keep drying you off. Now, listen, just sit down and write a letter to Mr. Roosevelt. Pour your little heart out. Make him cry. Personally, I'm going out in the kitchen and make myself a cup of tea.
Write a letter to Roosevelt. That's not a bad idea at that. Let me see now. Dear Mr. President. That's too formal. Dear Chief. That's it. Dear Chief, I know you must be pretty busy these days, but I got a very important... Excuse me, Frank, there's somebody at the door. Come in.
Hi, mister.
Oh, go away, little girl. I'm in no mood to stand around and fiddle the paddle with you. I'm sore.
Where?
Well, in the driver's seat, if you must know. It's this mileage rationing. That's what I'm sore about. Me only getting 4 gallons. Who do they think I am?
Gee, who do you think you are? My daddy only got that much, and he says he can make it do.
Well, your daddy... Say, I'd like to have a talk with him. Where is he, anyway?
He's out of town, mister. He's in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, Grand Rapids, eh? Oh, I played there many times in Vaudeville, say.
You did?
The old Empress Theater. Ah, it's a great little city. Big furniture center. Been lots of big fortunes made there in furniture, sis.
I know, mister.
Mhm.
Lumberjack, huh?
Look,
I just thought that was interesting because of the Grand Rapids thing and listening to her, to Miriam Jordan do the little girl's voice.
Live audiences?
Yeah, the shows were done in front of live studio audiences. Yeah. Of course, one of the regular pieces of shtick in this show was Fibber always going to look for something in the hall closet. And every time he opened it, of course, the prop people would dump stuff out and make a lot of noise. When they transitioned into television briefly, we did get that.
are you ready?
As soon as I get my hat ready.
Well, hurry up, Molly. This is the most important meeting since I've been Chamber of the President of President of the Chamber of Commerce. Where's my speech?
In your portfolio.
Yeah, I know, but where's my portfolio? Oh, I know. It's right here in the hall closet. Straighten out this closet one of these days.
Anyway, another show, I'm not going to get around to everything. Another show that stayed around for a long, long time was the Goldbergs. It started on radio and eventually transitioned to television. Gertrude Bird owned it, wrote it, produced it, did everything there.
Hello, my dear, dear friends. So how are you feeling today? Why, fine, I hope. But in this weather, it's not always easy to feel so good. Hot one day, cold the next day. Who knows even what to wear to feel comfortable? So what happens? Listen, any intelligent person knows that when he's feeling tired and not so, and his resistance may be low, and that can lead to trouble. So why shouldn't you try to do something about an ounce of prevention, huh? How? Ask me. Try ribitol. And that tired feeling, it can come because you're not getting the vital elements in right.
Okay. It is today, the stars don't generally hawk the products, but in those days it was considered, I guess, you trusted these people, you wanted to know what they thought about things. Another show that I found really interesting is Duffy's Tavern. It started out as a radio show and then briefly made the transition to television.
Vitalis for well-groomed hair and True Shea, the hand lotion with the beforehand extra, bring you Duffy's Tavern starring Archie himself and Gardner. Here's a new and different way to care for your hands. It's with True Shea, the beforehand lotion.
Yeah, the time of the year when the birds and the bees watch people and... Well, I might start this thing over again. Duffy's Tavern, where the elite... Spring and the whole world allows you at Mother Nature's wonder.
His opening, Duffy's Tavern, where the elite meet to eat. Actually, this show has sort of long coattails. It was it partly was written by a fellow named Abe Burrows and Larry Gelbart and Dick Martin, as in Rowan and Martin. And Gelbart wrote MASH. Yeah, he was one of the writers on MASH. Abe Burrows has a son named James, who eventually writes a TV show called Cheers, set in a tavern, you know. Anybody watch The Simpsons? When Moe answers the phone, what does he say? Moe's Tavern, where the elite meet to drink. And what is Homer's favorite kind of beer? Duff. I mean, it's all interwoven in very strange ways. Well, I am running out of time. I'm going to hate to do this. You're probably asking yourself, where's Lucy? Well, Lucy did start on radio in the, oh man, what am I going to do with this here? Lucy gets started just as we're making the transition from radio to television. And Lucy is unusual because she is a businesswoman, and she is smart and tough as nails. And so when CBS was talking about moving her show over to radio, to television, they were not so sure about this idea of her being married to a Hispanic guy. I mean, this is 1950 after all. Who would believe it? So Lucy basically says, you want me, you get Desi. Excuse me. And of course, the show proved to be enormously popular. The night that Lucy gave birth to Richie Jr., the ratings were higher than they were for Eisenhower's inauguration the next day. So, yeah, that was certainly one of the more successful transitions. Life of Riley, I'm not going to do, I cannot do all of this. I want to look at this one. Do you know where the Lone Ranger started? Detroit. You're right. Yeah. Excuse me just a second.
A fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver, the Lone Ranger.
I'm just going to shut up. I think most of the time I deal with the technology pretty well. Once in a while I get buffalo. There's one. Thank you. Now, you had a question? Oh.
The Lone Ranger started, they had their studios at the top, before they moved to the Fisher Building. They were at an office building and a residential hotel that was right across the street from Wayne State University. There were an awful lot of us who learned about broadcasting in those studios.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And there was the Lone Ranger, and right after that there was that what the Phantom followed? There were four that started at 6 o'clock and they ran till 7.
Yeah. Well, the Lone Ranger did begin in a studio in Detroit, and of course it's radio, and you can't see the guy who's doing the voice. Eventually, the Ranger was hired to do a promotional appearance, and they decided this guy ain't going to cut it, and so they hired a guy in the studio. His name is Brace Beamer, and he appeared as the Lone Ranger, and from there on out, he was the Lone Ranger. I'm told that the first time he appeared, you have to have the stallion Silver. They ended up with some old sort of grayish nag that really did not fit the description at all. So it's the problem of taking that radio image and making a visual thing out of it. There were some problems with the show. The guy who originally was doing the voice was killed in an automobile accident. And they had to write a series of programs where the Lone Ranger, I think, had been shot or something, and he was badly wounded, and all we could hear was his sort of muffled voice, until they could find somebody else who could fill it in. But it did become this enormously popular program. I still remember listening to it on the radio. I would have been, what, 9, 10 years old, something like that. I think I had. This may be the interview. Okay, if we can just get some.
Is there really a horse named Silver?
There is now, Bill. But I'll admit I didn't get him until the mythical Silver of our radio show became so popular.
I see. Well, as long as we're going behind the scenes, how did you get to be known as the Lone Ranger?
Well, Bill, you see, 13 years ago, a new radio program started telling a story of some Texas Rangers who were ambushed and shot by outlaws. Only one of the Rangers lived, and because he was the only one left alive, he became known as the Lone Ranger. I was fortunate enough to play that part.
Well, now, would you mind telling me what your real name is?
Not at all. My name is Brace Beamer, and I started in radio just as soon as I returned from the last war.
You must have been a mighty young man when you went into that last war.
I was, Bill. I was only 14 years old. As a matter of fact, I was the youngest survivor of the famous Rainbow Division.
And may I add that you were awarded the presidential accolade, the Purple Heart, and the Victory Medal with 6 battle bars for being wounded in action? No wonder you play the Lone Ranger so convincingly. Tell me, of all the honors the Lone Ranger has received, which one pleased you the most?
Bill, I think I'm proudest of the fact that when our American armies invaded North Africa in 1942, General Eisenhower selected a password for our troops that he thought every American soldier would know. That's why the official password was Hi-Yo Silver.
You have a right to be proud of that. Thanks so much. Good luck and good night.
Good night, and thanks, Bill.
Clayton Moore got the job for TV. Brace Beamer was too old by the time they were transferring to TV. Clayton Moore got the job because he sounds so much like Brace Beamer. And the producers thought this would be an easier transition. People have never seen Beamer, but they certainly know the voice. Okay, we'll just have to say we can't get to the rest of it. Questions or comments? Let's open it up.
Those of us who have lived in the television age are familiar with the metrics that are obtained by companies such as Nielsen to gauge viewership. What did they do in the 40s and 50s to gauge the listenership?
There were companies, forerunners of Nielsen, and I think Nielsen started this way too. There were companies that people could have a little book that they would keep track of what they were listening to, or they could take surveys. I mean, pretty much the same sort of thing that we're doing now. You've got the mic.
I remember Mama was a family show on TV of a Jewish family, I believe. Did that come from radio? Swedish, huh?
Swedish.
Ah.
Yeah.
Did that come from radio? Does anyone know?
I haven't seen any reference to it. I don't think so. It did intrigue me that the Goldbergs were so popular, and I think in a way, you're looking at this group of society that is not very familiar to most of us. And did have a clip on here. There was one where they actually go to a Jewish service, and it's a fairly long clip where they're showing a synagogue service. And I thought, boy, that must be something that nobody had ever seen in America at that point.
When Lucy went on television, I don't know whether it was her decision or if it was Desi Arnaz's, but they filmed. They did not use kinescope, which was an electronic version of, they actually filmed and I don't know if it was 16 millimeter or 35, but they filmed those programs, which is why if you look at them now when they do reruns, they don't look like the kinds of clips that you were showing here, because the earlier ones were so fuzzy and the filmed ones hold up.
Yeah, a kinescope is a method of basically taking a film of a TV screen, and it's a very cumbersome and not very effective way of recording.
When I was probably in later elementary school or middle school, we went to Chicago to see the Lone Ranger at a rodeo kind of show. And we remember that he could hardly ride the horse.
Huh. Yeah, I saw Clayton Moore in 1956 when I was in Cincinnati, and he was pretty effective on the horse. Yeah.
I was from Pennsylvania, and we had mountains all around our town. And the only way we got TV is they put big antennas up on the mountain and then they'd pipe it down into the city. And that was in the early 50s.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because they had to have a man up there to monitor and, guide everything. And you'd be watching a movie at night. And if you didn't like it, you'd switch it over to another movie.
I remember going across the street to a neighbor's house to watch TV. And I think this guy and my dad particularly liked boxing. So I was not really keen on boxing, but the Gillette Friday night fights, we would go over and watch. Yeah. Okay, other comments or questions? Yes.
I think it's interesting that our interest in audio has not disappeared. If you look at the popularity now of podcast, which we often, whether we're driving or something we want to do while we're doing something else, but yet, and they develop some of the same characteristics. They've got advertising, they're telling stories, crime stories are very popular. So it's just moved into a different medium or a different way of presenting it, but how it continues to be of interest to all of us to listen, not just to see.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, we got
a couple more questions.
Couple of comments, actually. Clayton Moore ended up in Minneapolis as a real estate agent, and he called it Ranger Realty. But he still made appearances as the Lone Ranger.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to make a connection with your earlier comment about the 39 television experimental program. Many of us knew Bert Tillstrom, who lived in Saugatuck during the summer, and eventually he was a young puppeteer in 39 and did, I don't know what kind of puppets they were, but another sort of a connection with Burr is that in 1973, we opened our summer theater with a production of Kukla, Fran and Ali, a retrospective, which went to the International Puppetry Festival and also to the Goodman in Chicago.
Huh.
Of course, he wasn't on radio, but he was very important on television.
One more here.
Theater organ, of course, was utilized for the silent movies when they came out because they could do all the bells and whistles literally. I noticed in your 39 clip that they had a theater organ going there, and some of the other ones they had the Hammond organ. Do you have any knowledge of why one or the other was popular?
I really don't. I'm afraid I'm not enough of a musician to have noticed the difference.
Any more questions? Well, thank you, Al, very much.
Thank you. I have enjoyed this.